All right, welcome to Professional Leadership. In this video, we're going to transition from the first part of the model that we've been working on, which were leader kind of character attributes, right? Things from the inside out, the personality, if you will, of the leader, and their ability to take that personality and influence the culture of the organization, right? So that's the first part of the model, is the leader's personality and character becomes an influencing factor for the entire culture of the organization, right? It is not the only influencing factor, but it can be the primary influencing factor if a leader understands their ability to leverage their own character and personality for the benefit and culture of the organization, right? Okay, so that was the whole first part. And if you remember the model from week one, what we're doing now is transitioning into part two. And part two of a leader's responsibility is to handle the executive decisions, right? So that's what we're going to do here. This is a three-part section, right, for executive decisions, right? So throughout an organization, there's all kinds of decisions on a daily basis, organization or ministry, that are made consistently, right? So the differentiating factor here for executive decisions, these are, for this model, things that we're going to say that are really only able to be done by the executive, right? By the director, by the leader in this organization. At every level, there might be some decisions. Say if you're in an individual department, right? You don't have to be the CEO. Perhaps within your individual department, some of this might apply. Maybe you're the director and everyone else is looking to you to make decisions for your department. In that case, you would then be the executive over that realm, the leader over that department. And so ultimately, executive decisions trace themselves all the way back to the chief leader, the executive officer of the organization. But these principles can be applied at various levels. So I want to talk about things that are executive decisions, right? And so for the model, we had three things. There was establishing vision. There was HR decisions, right? And those are specifically HR decisions for the top of the organization, right? That you don't want your CEO thinking about hiring everyone, but it probably needs to be very influential in hiring at the top level. So that's what we'll do in a different section. And then the third one is the concept of a figurehead, that the CEO often is the face of the organization, right? So what we're going to look at today is this first one, establishing vision, right? Okay. Let's see if I can find a good marker here. All right. Let's go ahead and clear off some of this. Establishing vision. So I guess the first thing we should do is, what does it mean to establish vision for an organization? Obviously, vision speaks to what you can see, right? So for a leader to establish vision, it is kind of a two-part process. Number one, the leader has to see it, right? So there's an information gathering kind of thing. There's a thought process. There's a brainstorming. There is a putting together the vision in the leader first, right? And then also with establishing vision is that word establish, right? So you have to have a vision in order to establish a vision. But establishing a vision goes beyond just the leader seeing it. The leader has to make everyone else see it as well, right? So when we talk about establishing a vision, we mean that the leader, perhaps individually or in a group setting, in some form, the leader has to be able to see this and to be able to envision what the organization should become, right? And then start on a process of making sure that everyone else in the organization understands what the leader sees. Everyone else doesn't have to necessarily agree with it, although that would be nice. But the primary thing that you have to do is get them to understand what you expect the company to look like, right? Now, typically you want everybody then to buy into that. Once they see it, then you expect your department managers, your various leaders underneath you to ensure that everyone is working towards that goal so that you have a streamlined organization, right? In a car, think of a car in a wind tunnel, and they put the smoke in the wind tunnel and it smooths over the car, and they use that smoke to tell if there are places where the wind is not moving over the vehicle smoothly. If there's a part sticking out, it will block the flow of the wind. And in many ways, that's what someone, a department or an individual is like who has not bought into the vision. They're creating drag, right? They're slowing things down. That's the reason you put a car in a wind tunnel, is to find out, are there parts of the car that are creating drag, right? And so anyone not following the vision becomes a drag on the flow of the company. So we want a streamlined organization. In order to do that, the leader has to be clear on the vision. The leader has to communicate the vision clearly, and then you have to have other leaders, support leaders, who are executing the vision, right? Okay. So the leader has to know what the company is going to look like. That's first and foremost. The leader has to have thought through this, right? And so I would interject not just what the company will look like, but then there's also this concept of time. So when we talk about a vision, and the leader says, okay, I know what I want this thing to look like, you then have to ask yourself, how long is it going to take to look like that, right? I think the concept of time and vision make a nice little formula there to understand time in its relation to vision. A leader could have this grand vision, right, of what they want the organization to look like, but that could be something that could take 20 years for the organization to do what the leader is seeing. So the leader must be aware of the time element that's involved in their vision. If they have created a vision that will take 20 years to get to, it becomes very important to break that vision down into other time frames, right? It can be hard for someone to take a vision that's 20 years down the road and at a departmental level understand what they need to do today to make that happen, because there's often so far away. So when you're communicating vision, I think you need to have perhaps multiple presentations here. That marker's not too much better. Multiple. So do you have something for this year, right? I think it's important for a leader to keep a 20-year vision of what the company could become, right? A lot of things can happen over 20 years, so you don't want to only have that in your mind, right? So you want to have that, though, as the backdrop. But I think it's also important to have at least a yearly vision. What do you expect them to become this year? What do you expect done this year? But in many ways, real substantial change doesn't always happen in 1 year. So I think perhaps maybe even a 3 or 5 year vision is appropriate, right? So I think you need to have different time frames in your mind of expectation, right? When we get into the next part after executive decisions is managing expectations, right? And keeping a responsibility that expectations are met. That's a leader's responsibility, is to make sure that the expectations of the vision come to pass. So what standard are you going to hold them to, right? If you have this great big vision and people didn't get to it in a year, maybe you gave them a 20-year vision and you have an unrealistic expectation for them. So you need to, in your own mind at least, understand what time frame is associated with my vision, so that whenever I go to hold people accountable, I am holding them accountable to a realistic time frame, right? So in your mind, as a leader, I think it's important to have close, midterm, and long-term vision in your mind. I think in terms of what you communicate, perhaps you communicate the long-term vision less frequently, the middle-term vision a little more frequently, and then the immediate vision of this year, you expect your leaders to be pushing for that. So I think that 1-year vision, probably you want your support leaders pushing that. That's what needs to get done this year. That's the immediate. That's what we're working on. They're executing that part of the vision. I think from the top level of management, they need to really push the 3 to 5 year vision. You're drawing people ahead. The 1-year vision, that's what they're doing right now. So that's what you need your support leaders, your managers, your directors to be executing that part of the vision. And I think 20 years down the road, you want to touch that every once in a while, but you don't want people thinking that your expectations are always so far ahead of where they're at that they're never meeting any of your expectations. That can happen when you're giving somebody consistently a vision that's going to take them 20 years to do. They may feel like they're always far away from any kind of satisfaction and fulfillment. So I think where the leader really needs to stake his claim is in the 3 to 5 year vision. Where are we going to be in 3 to 5 years? Keep pushing that so that you're kind of incrementally pulling everyone forward towards what in your mind you know is actually the 20-year goal. You're pulling them forward, though, with visions of what we can be in about 3 years, maybe 5, right? Okay. So understanding the time element. Another aspect of vision that I think is really important is this concept of synthesis. Synthesis. All right. And so, striking out here on my markers. All right, try this. Okay, that'll work for now. So this concept of synthesis. So synthesis and vision. So we talked about time and vision. And I'd like to build a case for synthesis and vision, right? So what does synthesis mean? First of all, synthesis means how everything interrelates, right? So when you're a leader creating a vision, you are really creating a snapshot of the company at different stages of time, right? So we talked about that. But the company itself is not just a single unit. It is made up of a variety of units, right? So really, your vision is not just what the company will look like in 5 years. It's what the accounting department will look like in 5 years. It's what the HR department will look like in 5 years. It's what sales will look like in 5 years. Production in 5 years, right? Facilities in 5 years, right? So there's a variety of departments within the organization that all have their own unique ways that they will evolve over the course of 3 to 5 years, right? So to have a really accurate vision, it's not just to say, well, I want our company to be the best company in 5 years. Well, what does that look like, right? What does that look like on a departmental basis? And so you have the evolution of your company over the next 20 years, which is really a synthesis of the evolution of your individual departments over 20 years. Now, the reason why the leader is presenting a vision that shows an awareness of individual departments and how they need to develop, and why that can't be just left only to departmental managers is this concept of synthesis. So if you have accounting, right, and you have we'll call this one PR production. AC accounting, PR production. So production is saying, well, we're being held to a standard that we need to produce more, and we need to produce more efficiently. And so in order to do that, we need more equipment, newer equipment, right? That our old equipment is only producing at a certain level of efficiency, and if we're going to reach these goals that we have for 5 years, we need to purchase some different equipment. Okay, so that's the production vision, right? The accounting vision is we need to increase cash flow. We need to make sure this company's expenses stay managed well. And so for them, the goal is lower expenses. But over here, they want to purchase more equipment, which is more expensive. On an individual level, their goals, in many ways, are opposite, right? So if you leave the vision of each department only up to individual departments, you get competing expectations. You get competing visions because the accounting people are trying to keep expenses low. The production people realize they need to spend money. And so it takes executive leadership to come in here and say, what is the synthesis, right? What is the balance from the top between what they can purchase and the need for the accounting department to keep expenses manageable so that they can keep cash flow, so that HR can pay bills and pay salaries, and so that other departments can purchase the things that they need. There has to be a balance. So that's why I say the vision must incorporate this idea of synthesis from the top down, because only the executive leader has the vision of all the departments in mind at once, right? I know this happens even in church settings when I was pastoring, that there would be different departments and they each have different goals and different visions, and sometimes they were different, or sometimes they both wanted to use the same thing for different purposes or use the same place at different times, and you have all kinds of conflict between different departments because each department is trying to do the best for their department. So it's not that they're mean or bad or don't care about the company. They care about their department, right? Because that's where they work on a day-to-day basis. That's what they're responsible for. And so they're trying to do the best for their department, which when they go to an extreme on that can be actually negative for other departments, right? So that's why it takes a leader to create the vision so that production can come back to accounting and say, listen, I know that you're supposed to keep expenses low, but the vision from upper management is that we have to increase our efficiency, which means we have to purchase this equipment. This is not just something that we want to do because we want to. This is part of the vision. And then the leader is talking to them and saying, we're going to lower expenses, but we're going to have to find a different way to do it without sacrificing some of the equipment that we need. And so in the accounting department, they know, because they've received the vision from the top, to expect these people to purchase some more equipment because that's part of what upper management is telling them to do. And so you kind of create a synthesis within the organization. And this is an important element for the leader because only the leader has that perspective of how each department interrelates with the others. And so this vision from above is best if it's not just some kind of generic, kind of cliche about where they want the company to go, but it's a specific vision for the company that addresses individual departments and what they should look like over the course of 3 to 5 years. And when that comes down from the top, you eliminate a lot of interdepartmental friction, right? Because a lot of that has been addressed from above, and you avoid leaving vision of individual departments to those departments because they will want their department to be successful in the extreme. Everyone does. And that can create competing principles. It can can create competing priorities, right? And then you end up with an every man for himself kind of organization. So the leader creates the vision in a more specific way than just a broad thing that they'd like the company to do. They create it specific enough that each department is governed by a unique vision from the leader.